I own a lot of laptops, but this one's a little bit different. Most hardware/gadget companies or brands start with an idea and a target consumer and produce products that are relevant to the target consumer. So Shenzhen-based company Gamepad Digital continues to surprise by being different. Not only are they carving a niche as a creator of miniature ultra-portable PCs that they keep refining every year, but they also seem to have sent any conventional marketing idea of a target consumer out the window in favor of finding more use cases for their mini PC expertise. They started with the Gpd Win, 2 generations of portable lightweight gaming on a tiny package for gamers more interested in portability than power. This led to the Gpd Pocket, 2 generations of tiny laptops meant for ultra-portable work, while still looking stylish and probably meant for anyone doing office work, which is people who enjoy the MacBook aesthetic. And naturally, the next step of this evolution is this, the Gpd Micro Pc, yet another pocket laptop with a completely different use case. The Gpd Micro PC is a handheld industry laptop meant for IT professionals and people working on more hands-on jobs. Because of this target, it changes the shiny aluminum of the pocket for a rugged and more resistant plastic. I might have dropped this while recording the video, and the casing is still all sound, which will have likely deformed the pocket, so definitely a good choice for heavier work. The extra thickness comes from the inclusion of a very impressive array of ports for any laptop, let alone a tiny one. 3 USB 3.0 ports, a USB Type-C for charging, display or anything else, Gigabit Ethernet, which was very useful when downloading software and games, full HDMI, which made it easier to record them, and an RS-232 serial port. This might seem odd since these ports have pretty much disappeared from the consumer space, but these are still very common in lots of IT and industry equipment, so I'm sure a lot of people will find its inclusion very noteworthy. For example, this is a device that you will often find controlling several subsystems inside a bus or a tram, such as setting whatever message is displayed on the screen in a bus. And guess which port it has? That's right, the serial port is one of the options for communicating and configuring this device on the field. How about something you have probably seen before? This is the sort of screen that you will find in the register of a grocery store. Models similar to this one are in stores all around the world, and it communicates using a serial port. So if troubleshooting one, you are likely going to need a serial port or at least an adapter. So it does make sense that this could be a great handheld PC for on-the-go device access, given that you can get one for only a little bit over $300 on the Indiegogo campaign, making it probably the cheapest mini PC by Gpd yet. I could see how a lot of people might end up with just one out of curiosity of having a full pocket PC. Inside, you will find a quad-core Intel Celeron n4100 with an Intel UHD 600, basically the successor of the Intel Atom, and 4 GHz of DDR4 RAM, for this pre-production model at least. The CPU/GPU is a fair bit under what the Pocket 2 had, which makes sense since the programs this machine likely targets are far lighter, and it is a fair bit cheaper. Let's talk about TDP for a second. The reason why often 2 components with the same name, one in desktop and one in laptop, will have very different performance can sometimes be explained by TDP. Thermal design power in watts is the maximum amount of heat generated by a device during regular operation. The lowest the TDP, the less heat it produces and less cooling it requires. But less TDP usually comes at a cost in performance. Chips like Intel Atoms, Intel Celerons, or Intel M3s are designed to get the best performance possible for a low TDP. For most of the Gpd devices that I have featured, there are newer versions of the BIOS that allow an increase in TDP of their SoCs for more heat and better performance. But I'm saving that part of the older devices for a future video. My micro PC already shipped with a BIOS which has this functionality included right out of the box on its own category, meaning that you can set it for a higher performance or lower temperature depending on your priorities. This device is quite thick, and the cooling does seem to be able to keep up with the maximum 10 watt option, so I will be using that. Next, the RAM. 4 GHz is reasonable for something that might basically be a light terminal. Now, as I was writing the script, Gpd announced that they will permanently upgrade the final units to 6 GB, which is even more appropriate for this use case. But this is the LowSpecGamer. This device was not aimed, designed, or thought for gaming. But can we game on it? What sacrifices will it take? How far can this Celeron go? Since the integrated GPU has no dedicated VRAM, every game we try is going to be competing with all the memory Windows is already using. I made a whole video about scripts that you can run to reduce background RAM usage and reduce CPU spikes, but I took the more extreme approach and installed the unofficial Windows 10 Lite, which anytime I mention this, I will add a big warning about using unofficial versions of Windows 10. I went through great lengths to be careful of the credentials that I was putting on this thing. But with the reduction of RAM usage to a minimum, I can start throwing games at this thing. Let's start with what works without the need of too much tweaking. Portal 2, as usual and expected, pulled some pretty good performance on full 720p and lowest settings. For screens this small, I particularly suggest custom lower 16:9 resolutions like 960 by 540, since you're going to have a hard time noticing the difference on the device, and in games like Skyrim, it works great. If you log to 30 FPS, it will work without the need of too many mods or changes. CSGO, in the same resolution, also gives some decent start numbers, with an average of almost 40 FPS in the community benchmark map. As I need to start disclaiming more often, this map tends to push a PC harder than the actual game, so while it is very good for testing, you can expect better performance on the actual game. But that all took very little effort, so how about we start getting to the good stuff? Rocket League is always a favorite of mine in these situations, not only because it uses surprisingly little RAM on the lowest settings, but also because of the hidden resolution scaler that you can use to reduce the game to this garbled mess. But this garbled mess is still very readable, enough to keep it around 40 to 50 FPS, which is enough to play and win a 3 vs 3 match. Have I mentioned Arkham Asylum yet? It is probably one of the games that I have personally replayed the most, and it initially seems to work very well here on full 720p, although it can struggle a fair bit when you hit more open areas. Thankfully, this is an Unreal Engine 3 game, which has a fair amount of things to change in the configuration file. I did a whole video about it. This is not as low as the game can possibly go, you will have to watch the video to see how that looks like, but with some changes to shadows and illumination, as well as a small reduction in internal resolution, it becomes very playable, even in combat or tense situations, always over 30. Definitely recommended for specs on this level. Since we're on the topic of Unreal Engine 3, guess we could try Bioshock Infinite, and also the game has a benchmark, which makes it pretty easy to actually make comparisons. The benchmark tool at 720p returned about 20 FPS average. Again, very similar tricks to Batman on its own video, but this is not as low as it can go, you will have to watch the full Bioshock Infinite video for that. But with just some changes to the illumination, the reduction of shadows, and a cut to the internal resolution, it makes the benchmark closer to the 30 FPS mark. Remember Just Cause 2? I made a video ages ago on a mod that exists to basically remove a lot of the elements, explosions, vegetations, and so on. On 720, the Dark Tower benchmark provided an average of 21 initially, but after applying said mod, it jumps to almost 30, which is pretty impressive. Linus from Linus Tech Tips looked at this device in a very interesting stream. Oh, and by the way, are any of you in Canada? Because guess who is going to LTX this year?
Brutalizing that. Tech deals, hardware Canucks, LowSpecGamer.
So in that stream, Linus explores the more general details of this device and comments the following.
No, it doesn't run Crysis. It doesn't run Crysis.
But can it really? I installed the original Crysis on 720p and gave it a spin on the lower settings, and surprisingly, it did quite okay, with some occasional stuttering ruining it, but much better than I expected. That will not stop me from trying to make it run even better, of course. I already did a video on running this game on a device far weaker than this one by screwing up the textures, the vegetation, cutting on draw distance, and dramatically changing everything, but hey, No stuttering and decent performance in big open areas. It might not be technically playable, but this is what you wanted to see, right? This is why you came to the LowSpecGamer, right? Am I that one-dimensional to you? In general, it is important to restate that the Gpd Micro Pc is definitely not meant to be doing gaming, but its low price makes it very attractive as a mini PC for geeks to experiment with. I know for a fact I'm going to try installing Linux on this thing next. The good news is that with the RAM upgrade, you're likely going to get much better use out of it without having to resort to an unofficial version of Windows. I know some commenters are going to be unhappy about it, but at least with scripts like the ones on my Windows 10 optimization video, I can still see what they're doing, while installing a full unofficial proprietary OS from a random ISO online. Well, as someone who has almost lost important accounts in the past to password hacking, I'm always a bit careful. Ever since that incident, I'm happy to rely heavily on Dashlane, this video sponsor. Dashlane is a free program that helps generate unique, secure passwords for all your accounts that are stored in an encrypted storage that you unlock with a master password that only you know, so even if Dashlane gets breached, your stuff is safe. My favorite feature is that it auto-completes your secure password on every site you go, so all you need to do is to log in once when your PC turns on, and you basically never have to think about your passwords again during that day. As I said, it is free to use forever, but there's a premium version which adds functionality like cloud sync between different devices and a VPN for online privacy, useful for public Wi-Fi. I use it on my phone all the time. Go to dashlane.com/LowSpecGamer for 30 days free, or the first 200 people who use the code LowSpecGamer get 10% off Dashlane Premium. It is like $5 a month anyway, and well worth it. Thank you to them for their long time support, and you for watching.